Okay, so now we look at Chapter 5. Chapter 5, the Byzantine world of regulation. Not a very long chapter, but some interesting things to look at. It's interesting to take a look at and understand the things that happen, typically in our world today as new leaders and new regimes take over. The process of what we call a new broom comes into place, and people think, well, the best way to take care of this is wipe the slate clean, get out the new broom, and create new processes. In the beginning of your text here, a nice quote kind of sums that up. I was to learn later in life that we meet any new situation by reorganizing. How many times have you seen that in places where you work? And a wonderful method can be created, creating the illusion of progress while producing confusion, inefficiency, and demoralization. And this happens so often. This was a quote by Emperor Nero's Minister of Entertainment. So in your text, if you take a look at it, if you take a look at the topics introduced here, the first one introduced is something called net neutrality. And you may have heard about this. The idea behind net neutrality: if a user pays for a certain level of internet access quality and another user pays for the same level of access, the two users should be able to connect to each other at that rate. And sometimes that doesn't happen. So net neutrality advocates began to raise concerns about the ability of broadband providers to use a chokehold on the last mile infrastructure to block internet applications and content as they desired, particularly the access to their competitors. So they tried to figure out ways to create chokeholds on different people on the internet based upon their applications and what they were putting out in terms of content on the internet. The FCC then issued a broadband policy. It's going on 10 years ago now, actually longer than that, 2005. So 2005 coming up 20 years ago. The policy then was to encourage broadband deployment and to preserve and promote the open and interconnected nature of public internet. Consumers are entitled to access the lawful internet content of their choice. So the folks trying to put the chokehold, we're trying to figure out ways to limit your access, my access, based upon our content and how we wanted to use the internet. Again, to encourage broadband deployment and to preserve and promote the open and interconnected nature of the public internet, consumers are entitled to run applications and use services of their choice, subject to the needs of law enforcement. Okay, so we have a right then to run what we desire and not have things levied over us to control it. To encourage broadband deployment and preserve and promote the open and interconnected nature of the public internet, consumers are entitled to connect their choice of legal devices that do not harm the network. Okay? Do not harm the network. To encourage broadband deployment and to preserve and promote the open and interconnected nature of the public internet, consumers are entitled to competition among the network providers, applications and service providers, and content providers. So under broadband stimulus then is created with the goal of expanding the degree to which broadband access is available throughout the country, particularly in rural areas. So the Rural Utilities Service became a $2.5 billion service provider, created the Broadband Initiatives Program, Under the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, another $1.6 billion then provided broadband technology opportunities. Both the BIP and BTOP augmented the FCC's original 4 mandates related to net neutrality. An important note, these rules are binding on applicants as well as all downstream contractors that they may engage to carry out the work. Okay, reward then for first movers, the folks that get out there first and try to shape this. The innovation involves significant risk. You would expect that. Rewards allow them to recover the cost of innovation. First movers then advantage erodes very quickly, though, as you make this happen. Success in the access marketplace translated to sustainable profits relies on network ownership, period. If we look at then the current issues in regulation, competition, privatization, license and spectrum management, infrastructure sharing, if you take a look on your textbook on page 225, each of those is identified here. The extent to which competition should be used to enhance the delivery of a superior customer service experience in a given area, or the extent to which the same competition hinders delivery for a QoE, the quality involved there. It's absolutely clear that those markets that are not dominated by a single large player are more healthy and more vibrant. Under privatization, in those countries where the service provider is still a state-run entity, how best to privatize it as a way to foster innovation, economic growth, and healthy competition. License and spectrum management, the extent to which wireless services should be centrally controlled, and the manner in which they should be fairly disseminated. And finally, the infrastructure sharing, the infrastructure required to properly operate a telecommunications or IT service delivery platform is breathtakingly expensive. A lot of times this comes down to something we call the rights of way. You know, if somebody was there before you and they have the right of way, whether it's physical, whether it's wireless, whether it's domain, it can be expensive to overcome that. Is it within the realm of the regulator to mandate infrastructure sharing? And this happens a lot in the cell phone industry. There is infrastructure sharing as a way to reduce costs to both providers and consumers. 2 directions for managing this challenges have emerged. The first is to simplify the process by consolidating licenses so that carriers do not have to apply for different licenses for different services. Second, to simplify the market entry procedures by eliminating the bureaucracy. So there are hurdles to be overcome, and they can be expensive. Under the spectrum management then, the impact of IP and voice over IP, not services, rather they are technology opinions. Universal broadband, the global mandate then involves or revolves around healthcare, education, economic growth, and a transparent government. And so all of these play heavily into the universal broadband. Unfortunately, a lot of these become targets of cyber crime, and that's the unfortunate thing. So the question then, is it an inalienable right, like religious and political freedom? And we see a lot of things that that are coming to light now, especially with big tech, in revolving around what is a right and what is not, and what could and what should be heavily regulated, what should have hands off, and what things should big tech keep their hands out of and their fingers out of, because there's certainly a lot of overlording going on, and basically oligarchical exchange.